Peace. We're live on Instagram. Check, microphone check, microphone check, check, check. Okay, we're live on Instagram and YouTube at Abu Gaddafi. Live. Welcome back to another session of Sun Studies. Another session of Sun Studies. We dive into the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and his articles in the book, An Invincible Truth. We dive in deep, at least a mile deep, at least. Before we do get started, I do pray everyone here is in health and great health. Pray you're doing well. Great health physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, as well as financially. All right. Just make sure the distance is good. Well, without further ado, welcome back. We're gonna get started here in a brief second. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Okay. As we proceed to give you what you need. Welcome back. Before we open up in the name of Allah, who appeared in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, to whom we forever and ever give praise and thanks for raising a divine leader, teacher, guide, and example in the person of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. In these two great and holy names, I greet the brothers and the sisters in the universal understanding of peace of Assalamu alaikum. So today, I won't take up too much of your time. I do want to briefly review a few points in the opening, and then we'll go ahead and get right into our subject today, which is solution for the niggas problems. And niggas got problems, so we got the solutions in an invincible truth. But real quickly, I spoke on it before, but I really want to emphasize uh, the truth of the matter when we say in our opening, uh, in the divine names and holy names, or the divine person, things of that nature, especially in regards to the messenger, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. When we do our opening, we open up in the name of Allah, who appeared in the person of Master Farad Muhammad. And we thank him for raising up for us a divine leader. It should be known that it wasn't that this little man from Georgia, and no disrespect, this little man from Georgia named slave named Elijah Poole. It wasn't that his essence or his being at the time was divine. It wasn't spooky like he dropped down from heaven. It was that this man, Allah in the person, Master Farah Muhammad, had a supreme wisdom and a supreme mission and found one in the mud, one amongst us that was dead, and raised him up and breathed life into that man. And the life that Master Farah Muhammad breathed into that man, raising him up from a horizontal dead level, raising him up to a vertical, resurrecting him from death, brought him into his divinity, taught him how to accept his own and be himself. So it's not some spooky concept of, people dropping down from heaven and being divine. And no, that's what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaching is getting us away from teachings like that, spookism, believing in things that we know not. So I really want to emphasize that point. And so that leads me into a proclamation, a profession of I bear witness that there is no God worthy of worship besides Allah, who came in the person of Master Farad Muhammad. And I bear witness that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is his messenger. And I further bear witness that the lessons that our Savior Allah gave us to study and learn is the fulfillment of the prophecies of all former prophets. And those lessons are none other than the supreme wisdom lessons. With that being said, we have today our article written and published by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad on June 8th, 1957, and today is June 8th, 2025. And so we're going to go ahead and jump right into the article. We don't want to waste any time. Like I've said previously, I'm going to take my time, but I'm not going to waste my time. Okay. So it says here, solution. Now, in the article, it says solution for the Negroes' problem. Because we're in 2025 and Negroes still do exist, but we want to be able to stay in time on time. The Negroes is transitioning to African Americans and niggas. And so we don't want to be behind. We don't want to give any excuse. So that wasn't about me. I ain't no Negro. And we know that it ain't no difference. But with that thought in mind, we just go ahead and say, okay, well, for the African Americans and niggas, you want to say, because if you really want to break it down, the same problem that was afflicting the so-called American Negroes is the same problem that is afflicting the African Americans and same problems that's afflicting niggas. The only difference is if you look at quote unquote African Americans who have gotten some level of wealth or notoriety in the society of America, in this white supremacist society, then they might not recognize that they have a problem. It's like in the Bible where Jesus said, the doctor doesn't go to the rich, the doctor doesn't go to the wealthy, he goes to the poor, he goes to the sick. They have no need. And so it's that same concept that's why the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had to go to the bottom rail. It's not that, you know, there aren't a few among us who have found success, but they have not found knowledge of self. They don't know who they are. They have shiny things, but they do not have shiny beings. So we're gonna go ahead and go into this article. It says solution for the niggas' problems. Now, Honorable Elijah Muhammad wrote solution for the Negroes' problems. And we understand solution for the niggas' problems. Niggas might not have a lot, but they definitely got problems. That's for sure. So it says white man's Christianity has absolutely failed to get recognition and respect for us, even from those who taught it to us. It is a religion that teaches you to love your enemies and hate your friends, to seek your reward after death. It has produced more division and hate than all the other religions combined. I'm going to read that again because it's bringing us in tune with what's going on. It says, white man's Christianity has absolutely failed to get recognition and respect for us, even from those who taught it to us. It is a religion that teaches you to love your enemies and hate your friend, to seek your reward after death. It has produced more division and hate than all the other religions combined. In this article, he emphasized where it says white man's Christianity. It says white Christianity has robbed and destroyed our peace and love for one another. It was white Christians who brought our fathers into slavery. It is white Christianity that is keeping you a subject people. They rape and murder your families, bomb your homes and churches if you demand equal rights and justice. They don't want you, nor do they like to see you go from them to your own. They fear your unity with your own. Now, let us not forget that it was the uh, KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, those are white Christians. The Nazis, those are white Christians. And it's easy to point at a quote unquote hate group and think that they're separate from the system that we're subjected to. But it's one of those unknown knowns, meaning a lot everybody knows it, but nobody talks about it. That the reason why the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK, the reason why they wear the hoods on their head, the masks to cover their identity, is because when they're done getting together in the public, when they're done, they go back to their jobs. They go back to being judges and politicians and police officers and firefighters and prominent members in American society. So it'd be foolish to think that those same people who are holding those prominent positions, those important positions in society, it'd be foolish to think that they don't take those beliefs with them wherever they go. So if they hate niggas with the mask, when they get together and carry and cover their face with the masks, and they're a doctor, when they go back to work and they're in the public, they still have those feelings. They still have that hatred towards us. So it'd be foolish to think that there'd be some type of difference. It'd be foolish to think that they're not going to use their positions of power to further implement or to further affect their racist beliefs. It'd be foolish to think that. They say you want to know who a man really is, give him a mask or give him some power. So it'd be foolish to think that if somebody has hatred for another person in the private, and if they have a position of power, that they wouldn't carry that hatred in their position of power in the public. They'll just be a little bit more concealed. So this is what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is speaking on when he says that don't forget it was the white Christians who brought our fathers into slavery. Let us also not forget that when we go into the courts, there's supposed to be a separation of church and state. But when people are sworn in into these prominent positions of authority, they're placing their hands on the Bible. So they carry this superiority belief into practice with them when they're put into these positions of authority. So it's not that these teachings is old. This is right on time. It says here, They rape and murder your families, bomb your homes and churches if you demand equal rights and justice. They don't want you, nor do they like to see you go from them to your own. They fear your unity with your own. So let us unite and be one people under the crescent of our religion, Islam. The interesting here placement of crescent also represents equality. The moon represents equality. It says here, seek for our nation what others seek for their nation. Seek for our nation what others seek for their nation. A country to ourselves where we can live in peace away from our enemies. Islam, the religion of peace, in believing it, brings about a peace of mind and contentment. It's a unifying religion. Its author is God. It teaches against the doing of evil of every kind, great or small. The aim of Islam in America is, he's going into the aim, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is going into the aim of Islam here in America, not in other places, here in the hills of North America. It says to teach our people the truth. All right. It says to clean them up and make them self respecting and unite them on to their own kind. Okay. It says bring them face to face with our God and teach them to know their enemies. Praise be to Allah. The problem began 400 years ago from the very first day that our forefathers set the sole of their feet on the soil here in the Western Hemisphere in the days of John Hawkins. It was in the year 1555. He was an English slave trader. In the year 1555, when John Hawkins began bringing our people away from our own native land and away from our own people to sell us to his white brothers here in the West. For the slave markets here to become merchandise, little did John Hawkins realize at the time that by bringing us here as slaves, he was sentencing his white brothers here to their doom. Now, this is interesting. What this reminds me of is how in the Bible, Allah, through many different messengers and prophets, always called us to remember the law of Moses. And by forgetting the law of Moses, it was the people's doom. Time and time again, his prophets have said, forget not the law of Moses. Even in Malachi, remember the law of Moses. And Jesus said, uh, think it not that I come to uh, remove the law, but rather to fulfill it. And he was speaking of the law of Moses. So the main concept of the law of Moses is called the law of cause and effect. They say that the best mathematics you can do is to calculate future consequences to present actions. So when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad here is saying that in the year 1555, when John Hawkins began bringing our people away from our own native land and away from our own people to sell us to his white brothers here in the West, for the slave markets here to become merchandise, little, little did John Hawkins realize at that time that by bringing us here as slaves, he was sentencing his white brothers here to their doom. So because John Hawkins forgot or forsaken, excuse me, forgot the law of Moses of cause and effect. By bringing us here to the hells of North America, he, in effect, sentenced his people to their doom. Now, understandably so, we know that the very grafting from Yaqub of bringing these Caucasians into existence, the very nature of their existence was already sentenced to being unsustainable on the planet. We understand that from a scientific perspective. And now you even have European scientists who are coming forth in the public and saying, it's correct that the Caucasian gene is a mutation and it's not made to survive. And by the year 2050, because Caucasians are not reproducing at a positive number, they're not reproducing at a number that their uh, offspring aren't going to have the time to continue. They're not reproducing at a level that they're dying. They're not reproducing faster than they are dying. So this is all backed by different sciences. So it's not just this belief that we have. It's a science, and you can see it. The proof is in the pudding. You can see it in the public. We know, backed by science, that the original man and woman can produce all shades of being, whereas a Caucasian man and woman cannot. They can only produce white. So that's a scientific principle. You can look at them and say, well, they had to have gotten here somehow. It's the same thing, and I'm not meaning this in any disrespectful way, but when you look at, dogs, you can say, well, how the hell you get a dog? How you get a Chihuahua from a wolf? It must have taken years and years of breeding. It's called grafting. They had uh 2 wolves breed, and then they took the smallest one, or the runt from the litter, and then they just took that and bred that with it's called selective breeding. And this exists in so many different areas of nature. It's all written in nature. That's how you get domesticated bananas and domesticated tomatoes and vegetables. It's just man choosing what and how he wants to reproduce and what result he wants to get. So the principle is not so far fetched. I think this is the concept. We make things too spooky. We make things too unbelievable. But then they say the truth is stranger than fiction. So it says here, reminding about the law of cause and effect, the law of Moses. It says he was sentencing his white brothers here to their doom, for the evil that they have and are still doing to our people here cannot be forgiven, but was all for a divine purpose, that Almighty God Allah might make himself known through us to our enemies, and second to the world that he alone is God. But our poor black mothers and fathers who were deceived by this devil John Hawking's lies and empty promises didn't have the slightest idea that their coming here to be sold into slavery would create a problem that would take Almighty God Allah himself and the righteous nation of Islam to solve. And that this problem would be solved at the end of the time of their arch deceiving enemies, the devil. So again, basically what it's saying is divine problems require divine solutions. This is the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. This is how Dr. Yusuf Bey stated that fact. Divine problems require divine solutions. And so this is what we are learning here. It says, I'm going to read that one again. It's very heavy to think that this is all preordained. It says, but was all for a divine purpose, that Almighty God Allah might make himself known through us to our enemies, and second to the world that he alone is God. But our poor black mothers and fathers who were deceived by this devil John Hawking's John Hawking's lies and empty promises didn't have the slightest idea that their coming here to be sold into slavery would create a problem that would take Almighty God Allah himself and the righteous nation of Islam to solve. And that this problem would be solved at the end of time of their arch deceiving enemies, the devils. That time has arrived. Since 1914 was it. But as long as you stay asleep from lack of knowledge about yourself, you are extending the life of them. They can continue to live only as long as you remain mentally dead to the knowledge of yourself and the devils. My followers and I have and are still spending much time and money and are suffering much persecution and ridicule to awaken our people to the knowledge of their own salvation. But we must remember that this present suffering is nothing compared to the joy that awaits us. Before we ever suffered ourselves, he, Master W.F. Muhammad, our God and Savior, the great Mahdi, Almighty God Allah in person, suffered persecution and rejection himself, all for you and me. We are now living in the days of the judgment and in the days of a great separation of peoples and nation. This problem of separating the boundary line of many nations are now being removed. You and me from our enemies. Hold on. This problem of separating, and then in parentheses, the boundary line of many nations are now being removed. You and me from our enemies and placing us in our own land back among our own people to help raise the so-called Negroes of America up to our proper place in civilization. Remember, it was Muhammad's finding of the black stone out of its place and inviting the four chiefs from four divisions to come forward and take hold of each corner of the mantle and lift it into its place. And Muhammad, with his own hands, who guided it into its place, was a sign of the four major points of our compass to come and help raise us, their dead brothers, and put us back into our own place, in our own nation, among our own people, in our own native land. That ends the article, and it continues, same title, on June 15th. So stay tuned for next week. God willing, inshallah, we're going to continue the same article, continued solution for the niggas problem. That concludes the article. We're gonna go ahead and I wanna after reviewing the article, I want to go into a little bit further how we opened up and we spoke on the supreme wisdom and that being the breath of life resurrecting the dead. And one of the people that came to mind is Malcolm X. A lot of people in the public now have reverence or revere or honor Malcolm X. What comes to mind about Malcolm X is the different stages of his life. Now, I want to be real clear that the movie that was produced and directed by Spike Lee is a rough depiction based off of parts and pieces of Malcolm X's autobiography, but it's not accurate. It wasn't accurate according to the truth, and it wasn't accurate according to the biography. So you should probably read the autobiography and also listen to the video on YouTube of Malcolm X apologizing and wanting to get back into the tutelage and leadership of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad before his death. Um, with that being said, the different phases of his life. So the world now honors Malcolm X. Malcolm X with an X on it. But what they're not realizing is that was a phase of his life. Malcolm began as Malcolm Little. Malcolm Little, Little was his slave name. Now, according to the history, Malcolm Little's parents were Garveyites. So he had some spirit in him that empathized with his black brothers and sisters. He wanted salvation and liberty for his people, but he did not have knowledge of self. If that's in the proof is he had the name Little. And in no disrespect to Marcus Garvey, we honor Marcus Garvey, but he pushed a form of Catholicism. So although he wanted a Black to Africa movement and he wanted liberty for his people and he wanted to go black to Africa, go back to Africa, he still taught a form of Catholicism, and he very seldomly, very rarely, few times involved God into his movement. And us as Black people are very God centered people. We don't want to be involved in anything that doesn't have to do with God or some form of spirituality. Now, sometimes we run so far away from a thing that we run right back into something that's spooky. An example of that is in 1975 when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad departed after being with us for so many years, teaching us the truth, bringing us face to face with God. It only took a day his son dismantled and got people believing into spookism, right back into the same golden calf worship that we just got out of. It doesn't make much sense, but it's what happened. And part of that is because most times we're not willing to accept the truth. We think that things need to be more than what they are. That reminds me of that saying where it says the lie has traveled halfway around the earth while the truth is still tying his shoelaces. So a lie travels much faster and is much more fanatical and admirable than the actual truth. Truth is just plain and simple. It is what it is. This is what it means. Take it or let it alone. Now, I'm saying all that to say that Malcolm, the people that they the the people that honor Malcolm X, when they look at the phase of his life, the person that they're honoring in reality is not Malcolm Little, it's Malcolm X. And it's not even Malcolm or Haj Malik El Shabazz. And I really want to highlight real one quick his name that he gave himself from the African perspective is it's Omawali. I'm gonna look it up. Malcolm X African name. I always speak on this, but I want to make sure that I'm accurate in terms of his name. It was uh Omawale. He received the name, it was a Yoruba name, Omawale. Okay, so I was correct on that. Now, bear with me here because I'm constructing a viewpoint. So, people who love Malcolm X and simultaneously, because of the movie from Spike Lee, have resentment towards the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, don't actually by name like Malcolm. They're actually looking towards Omawale. People who are like Africa first and they're have the Nigerian garb. Omawale was his Yoruba name, where he strayed away from Islam. Yoruba is a Nigerian spiritual practice. Before he became Omawale, he chose that name. He was under the name El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. Now, El Hajj is not necessarily a name, it's more of a title that says that he could afford and did make the Hajj. So any Muslim that has taken their Hajj or their pilgrimage, which is a principle in Islam, a pilgrimage towards a spiritual center, they would be referred to as El Hajj. So any Muslim has made Hajj can take on that title. You can have El Hajj Abdul, El Hajj Kareem. As long as the person has made Hajj, they'll take on El Hajj. So his name was Malik El Shabazz, not El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. It was Malik Shabazz. Now, most people don't understand that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad gave him that name. How do we know this? How do we know that he didn't travel to Saudi Arabia and change his name to Malik El Shabazz? Well, we know that because Shabazz, not only is it documented in history, not only can you just go into history and see that he went from Malcolm X to Malik Shabazz, but scientifically speaking, Shabazz is not a historical Saudi Arabian name. It was Master Farad Muhammad who taught us, who raised up the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who taught us that Shabazz, we are from the tribe of Shabazz. Shabazz wasn't a name that was known to us were it not for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. You very rarely see Shabazz at all. Matter of fact, that reminds me of a story when I used to go to the Orthodox Islam mosque in on Oahu. This was around the time that my son was being born, my firstborn son, and I was going there to experiment to see. I was reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I read where he said that he traveled to Mecca during Ramadan, and he was saying that he didn't experience any racism, and brothers the brother that he was sitting next to him was a blonde haired, blue eyed uh, Muslim, and then the brother next to him was dark skinned African, and they were sharing a meal, and he was just in awe about how Islam could bring these people together, and that interested me because I wanted to know exactly what he was talking about. So I did. I went up to the mosque during Ramadan, and I bore witness. I said, "Oh, he's right to some degree that he was able to see that you had blonde hair, blue eyed Muslims. There was a blonde hair, blue eyed Muslim." I said, "Wow, okay." I knew that according to the teachings on Elijah Muhammad, that's not new, and it shouldn't have been new to Malcolm X because the Honorable Elijah Muhammad always taught that there were Caucasian Muslims. But what was new to me is I'd never seen a quote unquote white American. This brother was in, I don't really know if you can define this, but brother in faith, this white American Muslim who took his Shahada bear witness that there is no God worthy of worship besides Allah, not in the person of Master Farah Muhammad, but Allah, and Muhammad of 1400 years ago is his messenger, has committed himself to those studies. He was a Caucasian American in the United States military and had accepted Islam. And that surprised me. I said, okay, wow, this must have been, you know, what Malcolm X was talking about. But the Honorable Elijah Muhammad also did teach on that. He said there's about 3.5 Muslims, and don't quote me on that number, but he said there was a couple of them that would accept Islam. And so, and this was during Ramadan. So I could see what Malcolm was talking about in his autobiography. And that's what Malcolm did. Malcolm went during these festivities. He went during Hajj and he went during Ramadan. And so what you got to do is you got to stick around. So I stuck around. I went continuously. And then I was able to see in real time how the different tribes of Muslims would treat each other differently based on so many different factors. And one of those things was quote unquote colorism. The African Muslims from Somalia and from Gambia, the African Muslims from Nigeria were not treated with the same reverence and respect as the Arab Muslims. They weren't treated with the same reverence and respect for the Muslims who are from uh, Egypt, not black Egypt, but from the Arab Egypt. So I'm able to witness this happen in real time, and I say, that's what it is. That's how it is normally. That's not how you're treated during ceremonies and festivals, that's not the truth. That's not how it really is. That's what they want you to think. What it really is when nobody's looking. And so I was able to bear witness to that in real time. And so that made me more clear that there may not be racism in Islam, but there definitely are racists Muslims. And then you can see how Arabs can travel from their homeland and come here into the hills of North America, and they can set up a liquor store and sell liquor and pig to the black community. There has to be a level of racism to be able to do that, to say I'm greater than they are. I'm willing to be hypocritical for the cost of a dollar and not teach these people the truth. So it doesn't make sense for people to honor and respect a once man named Malcolm Little, honor and respect the man going out named Omawale, who was known as Malik Shabazz, and then saying that you love Malcolm X. And I'm what I'm getting to the point here is this concept of the supreme wisdom. So it was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad who gave Malcolm X the name Malik Shabazz, taught him the origin of the first God, creating himself from triple darkness. So it wasn't that Malcolm X, Malcolm Little, Malik Shabazz, or Omawale was this great man from inception. When when Malcolm X was Malcolm Little, nobody on the face of the planet loved that man. He was a robber, a pimp, a drug user, and a drug dealer. This is all in the not only in the autobiography, but it was in the movie that Spike Lee put out. He had a hatred of self. He would conk his hair, dye it blonde, lay it down to the side. What they say, dye it, fry it, and lay it to the side. So he had a hatred of self. He didn't have a love of self. He hated himself. He didn't love what he saw when he looked in the mirror. And if you don't love yourself, then nobody else can love you. So nobody loved Malcolm Little. Malcolm Little was a dead man. And matter of fact, Malcolm Little was a perfect example of the niggas who are here today, who have a hatred of self. Not only do they hate themselves, but they hate their brothers. And just like Malcolm Little, not only did he hate himself, he hated his brothers, but he loved white women. I say all that to say that he was in a level of death that nothing could bring him out. And that's a perfect example of the niggas in the hells of North America. We have a hatred of self. You have to hate your brother in order to kill him for an unjust reason. I mean, brothers shouldn't be killing, bro. And now that's the whole concept of Jesus talking about turn the other cheek. He wasn't talking about your enemies. Once you make your brother your enemy, then you have to have some form of conversation. But that's the whole purpose of of Jesus saying, "Know that I've not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it." He was talking about the law of Moses. He was a completion and a fulfillment and understanding of that law, not to remove that law and abandon it and go to some different law. But that's because he was expecting that people knew the law he was talking about. He wasn't going to a new people. He was speaking to a people who had knowledge. That's how you know we're not supposed to be waiting for no Jesus from 2,000 years to go to resurrect us, because he didn't come with information that would raise a man up from the dead. He had to wait for his father to come raise him up from the dead. So that's who we supposed to be looking towards, his father, to come with something that would raise us up from the dead. Now that brings me back to Malcolm X. So Malcolm Little was a dead man. Nobody had no love for Malcolm. Matter of fact, even in the story, he said he wanted to be a lawyer. Caesar said, "Nah, Negroes ain't supposed to be no lawyers." Find something else. So if nobody loved Malcolm because Malcolm was dead, but all of a sudden, I'm saying all of a sudden intentionally, he gets raised up to the heights of the world where people on a global level are looking at him and bearing witness to this man who nobody ever loved. What was it? What was it that Malcolm knew or Malcolm had that was able to put him on one of the highest levels that America has to offer outside of its society? Malcolm didn't go through the schools of the Hales in North America. He didn't get his PhD. He wasn't taught by the professors. Matter of fact, he debated many of the professors. What did this Malcolm, formerly known as Malcolm Little, what did he know that that gave him the courage and the knowledge to debate with the most educated people in American society? This is what I'm referring to when I say that we forever give thanks and praise to Almighty God Allah, who came in the person of Master Farad Muhammad for raising up from us a divine leader, teacher, and guide. He raised up that little man from Georgia who only had a third grade education. He raised him up using supreme wisdom, put him on the heights of the world, not the devil's society. He didn't give him any position in devil's society. He raised him up to be a ruler of a nation, utilizing supreme wisdom. Same thing with Malcolm. Malcolm was little more than a pimp. He knew how to move in the streets, but it was Allah who made him prominent in the eyes of the world. Nobody loved Malcolm Little. Gave him Malik. Malik, his mastery, his ruler, took the name Malcolm from him. Said, nah, you're not Malcolm anymore. That's your slave name. Malcolm Little, get that, take that, put an X on it to mean you're no longer known for those. You're an ex pimp, ex drug addict, ex drug dealer. He's Malcolm is not the only one. That's the process that Allah has prescribed to the dead man. That's the process of resurrection. First, you admit that what you've been doing ain't working, and you deserve better. You was dead. Once you recognize that you're dead, you can wake up. And so that's what happened. Is the Honorable Elijah Muhammad put that X on him, X'd out his previous life, and told him, "You don't know, but I'm going to teach you." That's the X means unknown, X factor, unknown. That's in mathematics when they say solve for X. That's what it is. That's what we're supposed to be doing, solving for X. And once the mathematics came true, Islam is mathematics can be proven at no limited time. Once Malcolm show and prove, then he was given the name Malik Shabazz from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, not from Mecca. He didn't get that name from Mecca. So the person that people love is the supreme wisdom that was put in him, the life that was put in him from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, those teachings from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And so when we see these prominent figures in our history, as a scientist, we should look and say, what did they have that can bring them to that level of prominence in society? What did they know? What did they have? How did they do that? So that's the premise of our studies, is to understand that Master Fra Muhammad had a purpose and an agenda to raise the dead. And he showed and proved that he could do that by finding one that was dead. And that dead man recognizing who Master Farah Muhammad is, and them establishing a relationship for the purpose of resurrecting a man from the dead, showing and proving that it can be done, and then proceeding to how the Quran says, produce and then reproduce like the original. So if we recognize the power based off of what of the result that it brought about, simply put, how the Bible and Dr. Yusuf Bey always taught, you judge a tree by the fruit that it bears. So we recognize the fruit that is being bore by this man, then we want to reverse engineer. This is the teachings that we are studying. Islam teaches you are not a Muslim until you want for your brother what you want for yourself. So for me, I say, you know what? That here, this my brother got something. I wonder how he got what he has. You just ask your brother, how you get that? Oh, teachings on most teachers on Elijah Muhammad raised me up from a dead state. I saw a brother who was, you know, I gotta give all praises and thanks to Allah and the person most honorable. I mean, the person of the honorable. Like, excuse me for my slip, and the person of Master Farad Muhammad for raising up the honorable Elijah Muhammad. And I also thank Master Farad Muhammad for putting these teachings on my father from Dr. Yusuf Bey, because these teachings have always been in my environment since I was before I was born. They were in my mother's environment when she was uh when I was spinning in her womb, and she was making me, creating me from the materials in her womb. So what I'm seeing and painting the picture here is that just like that first God created himself from triple darkness and then giving us his form, the form of a man, and showing forth how he created himself. And that's the same method that is being done time and time again. I'm just so grateful that these teachings were in my environment that influenced my mother and the materials that she provided in the womb. So these teachings have always been there. It's just not that I didn't recognize, just didn't recognize how powerful they are to a dead man. You know, it's like it's like a child, you know, who was always raised with uh being like, not saying I was spoiled, but a child who just doesn't know that the parents have to struggle. They don't know the struggle. They don't know the value of something. If you always giving your children money and they don't got to work for it, then they don't know the value of a dollar. So I recognize now that growing up, I didn't know the value of the teachings that were always in my environment, and thankful to my father for having these teachings available. But now that I can see the true power of it being able to raise a man up from the dead, not saying that I can be qualified as dead, but I'm also not completely alive. That's the point of these studies. So you see something, you got to test it out. That's what a scientist does. He says, "Oh well, Master Farah Muhammad says, I want you to have luxury, money, good homes, and friends of all walks of life." And it says, "Put these teachings to the test." And it says that the lessons is the fulfillment of the prophecies of all former prophets. It's making these different claims. It's stating that all these things shall be added unto you. Even the Bible says, "Seek ye first the kingdom and its righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." So that's the purpose and the premise of these studies. It's to test it to see if it's true. And I'm just reviewing these things publicly and taking the time to review them and test them privately. Now, publicly, just to be very transparent, publicly we review an invincible truth because the articles are documented that way. June 8th, next week. Privately, we review the lessons and furthering in the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad with the focus of testing to see if they are right and exact. The whole purpose of these lessons is to show and prove. Which reminds me, before we get into our question and answers, it says here, then why did God make devil? To show forth his power, that he is all wise and righteous, that he could make a devil which is weak and wicked, and give the devil power to rule the earth for 6,000 years, and then destroy the devil in one day without falling victim to the devil's civilization. Otherwise, to show and prove that Allah is the God, always has been and always will be. So when I read this, the purpose of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teachings is not to, this is what he meant when he said that he's not a prophet. He's a messenger. He came to deliver a message from God. There is nothing else for a prophet to do. And then towards the end of his life, he said, there's nothing else for a messenger to do. So this is what is meant when he says, after me comes God and the executor. Because there's nobody who's going to come to bring a new message. That's not the purpose of these studies, is to hand one message over and deliver the message. Is to find the executables and deliver it unto self first. So when I hear it says here, then why did God make the devil? The purpose of the teachings is to get us out of thinkings of prophets and into the thinking of God. Now we know, oh, this is why God made the devil, to show forth his power. So we have to bear witness that God is all wise and righteous. It says here that he could make a devil, which is weak and wicked, and give the devil power to rule the earth for 6,000 years and then destroy the devil in one day without falling victim to the devil's civilization. So it's for us to bear witness, not to fall victim to the devil's civilization. Otherwise, to show and prove that Allah is the God, always has been and always will be. So in our life, we have to be able to show and prove that Allah is God in our lives. And we show and prove that by not falling victim to the devil's civilization. In the Bible, when Jesus was fasting and the devil approached him, he had all these different promises, and he was tempted and tested by the devil. And because Jesus was so well read, he had a response for each of the temptations. Towards the end, he said, "Get thee behind me." So what that means is that Jesus is telling the devil, I'm not going to fall victim to your civilization. You making all these promises. I'm not falling for it. And that's one of the biggest concerns in life is to know that when you're walking on this course, there is going to be temptations. We don't believe in spookism. We don't believe that the devil is some floating red man spirit. So that means if that's our belief that the devil ain't no spook red horn goat man devil is a man, primarily that the devil is a white man, that means that we are if Jesus was tempted by the devil, that means he was tempted by a man. And a man was there making him these promises. A man was standing in front of him and saying, I'll make you the ruler of the world. That it was a man that was telling Jesus, turn these stones into bread. It was a man that said, oh, you believe you protected? Why don't you jump off this cliff? There was a man that was testing Jesus in that fashion. And not only that, but Jesus himself was a man. So these scriptures and this way of life, this course of action is all involved are men involved. It's human beings. The Bible says that Jesus was the seed of David according to the flesh. David, according to the flesh, was related. If you look in the Bible, the timeline going down was related to Joseph, his father, not Mary, his mother. So if Jesus was born from a mother and no father, it would have said that he was related to David according to the flesh, and then the lineage from Mary would trace back to David. But no, that's not the case according to the Bible. The lineage of Joseph traces back to David. So this is all has to do with men, human beings. Jesus was the seed of David according to the flesh. When you trace down from David, going down, 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 David was Joseph. His father was related to David. It wasn't Mary. It didn't say that Mary's lineage traces up to David. It was Joseph's lineage that traces up to David. So the Bible says that Jesus was how does it say? It says Jesus was the seed of David according to the flesh and the seed of God according to the spirit. So that's what we're seeing. Jesus was a man in the flesh sense, but he has some supreme wisdom that he had access to that gave him life from the Father. And the Father, according to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, is a man. I don't understand how some spook could have a title such as the Father. To me, that doesn't make good sense. But anyway, the purpose of the lessons in fulfillment of the prophecies of all former prophets, when we read these lessons and these questions, they're to give us perfect example right here. Tell us why. Tell us what the devil teaches the 85% that the God is a righteous and unseen being exists everywhere. Allah is the God in the earth and in the heavens above, and is just and true, and there is no unrighteousness in him. But it is not unseen; is seen and is heard everywhere, for he is the all-seeing eye. So it's giving us insight. The way that the lessons state, I'm saying it gives us insight. It says here, the student must study his assignment lesson number 1. Each student should copy the answer of lesson of Minister Elijah Muhammad and study until the student is able to memorize by heart all answers to of said lesson number 1. Here, lesson number 1 is said to be the student's assignment first. Lesson number 1 lays the base of our work today and gives the student a clear knowledge of himself and his heavenly home. So, what's the difference between a clear knowledge of himself and his heavenly home and having insight? Isn't insight defined as a clear knowledge of self? Having insight to be able the ability to see yourself on the inside. That's what insight is. So these lessons are for the purpose of giving us a clear knowledge of who we are and our heavenly home, the best part of the earth, and who is the enemy to him and his nation, and why the enemy and righteous could not live together, and why was the righteous able to cast out his enemy. So everything is everything. It has to do with everything. It goes right back into itself. So now with that being said, I'm gonna open it up for our questions, comments, concerns. We're not gonna be here too long. We went into the article. I'm gonna open it up for questions, comments, concerns, dialogues, anything. If you want to participate, now is the time. Um, while I'm awaiting for any questions, comments, I'll review the comments here. I'll review the comments here. I seen this one brother had a page where he could put the comments on the screen. So I was attempting to look how to do that. I think you gotta have a different give me 1 second. Gotta have a third party platform or something of that nature. I'm gonna read the comments and then we're gonna go into the book here with more questions into our artifact. It says 100 answers to the most uncommon 100 questions, and then we're gonna continue on with our day and our week. It's the first day of the week. Okay, so it says here, loud and clear. Oh, this is when I was doing my microphone check. And Fry died and laid to the side. That was when we were talking about Malcolm Little. That's how his hair was fried, dyed, and laid to the side. Exactly. And he was doing that because he had no love for himself. And as the saying goes, if you don't love yourself, then nobody can love you because you're not even being true to yourself. If you don't love yourself, then you're not being yourself. And so, even if somebody is showing you love, they're not loving you. They're maybe loving the idea of you. They may be loving the potential of you, or they may even be loving the mask that you're wearing to hide your true identity. That's the science of it. And it's important for us to really go into the science of things because that eliminates the spookism. It eliminates misunderstanding. It eliminates believing in that which we know not. Okay, so now um oh, I know what I'll do. I was concerned last time that I wouldn't be able to keep track of the questions that we review. So I'm gonna keep this sticky note. I just want to say I appreciate y'all for being here and joining me during this time of this documentation. Um, I do thank you. I pray that as I'm doing these studies and I recognize that this is material that I'm using to build, you know how in social media say, just I'm just being my best self. So I recognize that that is work that needs to be done. I'm attempting to build my best self. And I recognize that these teachings, just like the lessons say, are the best part of the planet. So, with that being said, I'm going to use this sticky note to keep track. I'm going to address this question here from my father from Pause. Say, If you don't love yourself, how you gonna love someone else? Um, if you're gonna love if you don't love yourself, how you gonna love someone else? Um, is that a rhetorical question? Like as a comment? Because I don't think I said uh, you can love someone else. I don't think you can love anybody if you don't love yourself because you don't even know what love is. That's like how you gonna give somebody a dollar if you don't have a dollar? You can only give what you have. And if you don't have love for yourself, then you don't have love. Period. Just doesn't exist. Yes and no. I don't if you don't love yourself, how you gonna I don't think it's possible. Correct. Okay. Last week we went over a few questions, so I'm gonna take the time and just go over a few of these questions. Um, so the first two questions were in regard to his successor. If you didn't hear them, I recommend you tuning in to the last week's session of study. So this question says, after you are gone, Mr. Muhammad, the nation of Islam will continue to exist, but how? It will be the answer from the messenger. It will be a new Islam to what the old Orthodox Islam is today. It will be altogether a new one. The question is, you mean your successor will preside over a new Islam? Now, this is interesting, right? Because the first question that the interviewer asked him about a successor. Have you designated a successor? And the messenger answered that. I don't do that. Then he asked him, well, by what means would a successor happen? And the messenger answered, said, I don't know. I don't think that one is going to come. Then he asks him, after you are gone, Mr. Muhammad, the nation of Islam will continue to exist, but how? And the messenger answered that it will be a new Islam to what the old Orthodox Islam is today. It will be altogether a new one. And this man asked, after asking about his successor twice, asked again, you mean your successor will preside over a new Islam? It's almost as if he's not wanting to accept the answer. It's not good enough for him. The messenger said, there will be no successor. There is no need for a successor when a man has got the divine truth and has brought you face to face with God. So now that we can visualize and we can see in 2025 the fulfillment of the words that he was stating, we have to look at it from the understanding, not from the knowledge, if that makes sense. The understanding is that you cannot succeed a messenger. A messenger cannot have a successor. What and that's what he said. Not in those terms, but what he said was, I do not do that. I cannot do that. I did not choose myself. God chose me. And if he wants a successor, he will choose that one. So he said exactly the same. He said, I didn't choose he did not choose himself as a messenger. So it's very plain and clear what he's saying. I didn't choose myself as a messenger. So I can't have someone succeed me. I don't have the power to do that. Because if he chooses a messenger, then he would be God. He would be Allah. And he's saying, I don't have the power to do that. What the interviewer doesn't have is proper understanding. What he's asking is who's going to take over the businesses or who's going to continue to teach. But what the messenger is saying is, I am not choosing a messenger after me. There is no need for a messenger to come after me. There will be no successor. There is no need for a successor when a man has got the divine truth and has brought you face to face with God. So this is us bearing witness. Okay, we have divine truth. And the messenger did bring us face to face with God. So we don't need a messenger. We already had a messenger. So once you recognize this, then you understand, okay, this is what the messenger meant by after me comes God and the executors. It says, how will your resources be administered? That will be carried out by the nation. After setting up the nation on the right way or right path to take care of themselves, they do not need any more instruction on that. They will follow at it as the Constitution of America has been followed. Will it be run by local mosques? No, no, no. After this, the whole entire nation of black people will be governed divinely, and the government will be a divine government and not something that is governed locally like we have today. We will have a divine government set up for us, and it will stand forever. We will not need any change. What did you mean new different from orthodox? I meant just that. We have a new Islam coming up. The old Islam was led by white people, white Muslims, but this one will not be. This Islam will be established and led, listen, by black Muslims only. I think we'll stop there. Okay. Oh, let's put it here. And then I'm gonna finish. I saw that there were a few questions there. Okay. I'm gonna finish up these questions and then if y'all can do me a favor, those of you who are here, if you can hit that like button on the YouTube, not on the side here where the hearts are, but on the actual video. Um, if you can hit that the thumbs up like button, then that'll register as people are participating. And then I'm gonna address these questions. And we'll continue on with our day. Okay, continuing on. It says, what number God is Master Farad Muhammad? That's a good question. That's an excellent question. Um, I don't know. I will say that we travel our farther than 76 trillion years, and time renews itself every 50,000 years and is written in 25,000 years. Um, and every new period of 50,000 has a new God. So the equation estimated, I have to verify, but the equation would look something like 76 trillion divided by 50,000. And this is a hypothesis. Don't take this for actual facts. I don't know, but it says 1,520,000,000. 1,520,000,000. So my estimated response is 1,520,000,000. I don't and bear with me for scientists make hypotheses. So that's the stance I'm coming from, is to make that hypothesis. I'm not stating that that's the actual fact, and I don't know. But not only do I not know, I don't claim that I do know, but I am willing to learn. I am willing to find that out. So God willing, what I'll do is I'll go back into the lessons and verify the timeline. Now we do understand that in the lessons it says the Nation of Islam has no birth record, no beginning nor ending, and we understand that it dates further back than 76 trillion years. However, because Time is the measurement of motion, and the first God who created himself didn't begin measuring motion until after he was created. Then we know that time, uh, first off, didn't begin until he moved, but also he didn't think to measure it until after he was in motion and created from himself and established an environment and a system basically that reflected his own creation. So the number would be approximate. But what I'm going to do is go back into the lessons and figure out, according to 76 trillion and time renewing itself after a certain amount of time, and each era of time having its own God, that would place the proper number um, of Master Farad Muhammad. And I'm very interested to know now that you've asked that question. So thank you for your question. I really appreciate that. I'm always in awe or admiration of the questions you have because they come from such a profound place. Like your mind, the way it thinks about these things in regards to the teachings is amazing. And that's the beauty of not being born into something, because you come from a different mind. You see something differently, and it's like if I lived in trash, if trash was all over the place, I get used to the stank, I get used to the smell, I get used to the filth. I just get used to it. I wake up and don't think nothing. I'm not dissatisfied about it. I don't think to change it. But then if I invite somebody over and they're not used to that, they're gonna look at me funny, and hopefully if they love me enough, they say, "Man, this is not cool. Like you can't live like this. You can't live in this filth. You're not, civilized people don't live like that. We got to clean this. I help you clean this up. We got to go ahead and clean this up." And their correction may feel like being angry and mean at first, but really I know that it's out of love because they love me enough to change my situation. They love me enough to change the filth that I'm surrounded by. And it's because they're not used to that that they can bring that new mind or that new insight, that new thought into my environment. And so that's the beauty of not being raised up in the truth or in the teachings, is that when are introduced to it, you have this new way of thinking, this new mind. Now, I'm not saying that I was raised up in filth, but it's the same concept that if you're already used to something, then you very rarely will look at it with new vision, a new sight, new eyes, fresh perspective. So I say all that to say I thank you for asking those questions. I don't think I ever even thought about that. How many gods came before Master Farah Muhammad? But then, no matter what the answer is going to be in terms of number, it will always come back to Allah is one. That's why we say in our prayer, "Surely I have turned myself to thee, O Allah, being upright to him who originated the heavens and the earth, and I am not of the polytheists." So even though there's been many that came before you, there is only one. And I bear witness to that. Even the scientists who wrote history in advance for Master Fard Muhammad's time, they said that Master Fard Muhammad's wisdom was so bright, his light shined so bright that they couldn't see any history after. So the original man writes history in advance. We've been programmed in this society that history is written after it happens. So men will go do this and then they write history. But the original man writes history in advance. They write it according to how it is and then walk into the fulfillment of it. So that same concept, when the scientists were writing history in advance of Master Fard Muhammad, they said that his wisdom, his light was so bright that they couldn't see anything past him. And that's the time we're living in. So all praises are due to Allah. Um, like I said, I thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me um, while we conduct these sessions of Sun Studies. I always welcome questions, comments, concerns. If there are no other questions, no other comments, no concerns, no topics of discussions, I will take this time to close out. I never forget you're the best, the righteous, and the powerful. And I leave you as I came in the universal understanding of peace of Assalamu alaikum. Don't forget to hit that like button. Thank you for those who've done so far, but don't forget to do that. Registers to the algorithm that you was willing to participate. All right. Peace.